My name is Santiago Ramirez, and I'm going to present the Roaring Twenties, life and culture in America in the 1920s. Okay, first I'm going to start. I'm going to start with the changes of ways of life. Yes, during the 1920s, urbanization continued to accelerate. For the first time, more Americans lived in cities than in a rural area. New York City was home to over 5 million people in the 1920s. Chicago had nearly 3 million. That were the two most important cities in the 1920s. I'm going to continue with the urban versus rural. Throughout the 1920s, Americans found themselves caught between urban and rural culture. Urban life was considered a world of anonymous crowds, the strangers, money makers, and pleasure seekers. Rural, rural life was considered to be safe with close personal ties, hard work, and morals. Okay, here we have an example of a city life and a farm life, that is the rural one. Okay, the next topic is one of the most important and strange of all time, the prohibition. The prohibition um, is was when in America the alcohol was prohibited. One example of this clash between city and farm, the passage of 18 amendment in the 1920s. This amendment launched the area known as prohibition. The new law made it illegal to make, sell, or transport liquor. Yes? The support of the prohibition is the next topic. Reformers had long believed alcohol led to crime, child and wife abuse, and accidents. Supporters were largely from the rural South and West. The church affiliate, Anti-Saloon League, and the Women's Christian Temperance Union helped to the push of the 18th Amendment through. Here we have a poster supporting prohibition that says, "Please vote against the sale of liquors," and we got a mother and a child. I'm going to talk about the organized crime, and one of the most important criminals of the 1920s. That his name was Al Capone. The prohibition contributed to the growth of organized crime in every major city. Chicago, that was the city of Al Capone, became notorious as the home of Al Capone. Yes, a famous bootlegger. Al Capone took control of the Chicago liquor business by killing off his competition. The next is the government fails to control liquor. Eventually, prohibition's fate was sealed by the government, which enough money to enforce the law. They try to control this, but actually they can't. The task of enforcing prohibition fell in 1,500,000 poorly paid federal agents. Clearly an impossible task. Okay, the next is the support fate of prohibition repealed. By the mid of 1920s, only 19% of Americans support prohibition. Many felt prohibition caused more problems than it solved. The 21st Amendment finally repealed prohibition in 1933. Was a historical day. I'm gonna talk about science and religion clash. Okay, first I'm gonna talk about this image and then about this that everybody knows it. That is okay. Another battleground during the 1920s was between fundamentalism and fundamentalist religious groups and secular thinkers over the truths of science. The Protestant movement, grounded in literary interpretation of the Bible, is known as fundamentalism. Fundamentalists found all the truth of the Bible, the religious ones, including science and evolution. Okay, the next. No, it's a trial. No. Okay, I'm gonna talk about of the women in the 1920s. That actually is a very interesting topic. Okay, after the tumult of World War One, Americans were looking for a little fun in the 1920s. Women were becoming more independent and achieving greater freedoms, like the right to vote, the more employment, and the freedom of the auto. They can take a car and Okay, I'm going to talk about the flapper. During the 1920s, a new ideal emerged for some women, the flapper. A flapper was an emancipated young woman who embraced the new fashions of urban attitudes, like the fashion they used. Okay, the roles of women. It's a very interesting topic because during history, women has been discriminated, but they also have rights. Okay, so I'm going to talk about it. The fast-changing world of the 1920s produced a new role for women. Many women entered the workplace as nurses, teachers, librarians, and secretaries. However, women earned less than men. Yes, the day of pays men have more money than women. That's a type of discrimination of these people. Uh, and were kept out of many traditional male jobs, like the management. They think that its relation with money or things like that, and face discrimination, obviously. Okay. The modern family emerges. As the 1920s unfold, many features of the modern family emerged. Marriage was based on of romantic love, not like the past years that there was they was because of money. Yes, women managed the household and finances, and children were not considered laborers. Yes, wage earners, but rather developing children who needed nurturing and education. In these times, children do not work the majority of the times. Okay, I'm going to the section 3, that is education and popular culture. During the 1920s, developments in education had a powerful impact on the nation. That's why a country that helps education, it's a country that is going to have a better future. Yes, and United States discovered in this time. The enrollment in high schools between the 1940 and the 1926. The public schools met the challenge of education, educating millions of immigrants. Okay, I'm going to talk about expanding news coverage. Uh, as literacy increased, newspaper circulation rose, and the mass circulation magazines flourished. The, we're gonna talk about this as one of the most important ways of noticing people, the magazines and the newspapers. Yes. By the end of the 1920s, the 10 American magazines, including Reader's Digest and Time, both circulation over 2 million. Okay, I'm talking about a very important topic, that it's the radio. That we also use it in these days. Although print media was popular, yes, newspapers and magazines, radio was the most powerful communications medium to emerge in the 1920s. News was delivered faster and to a larger audience. Americans could hear the voice of the president or listen to the World Series alive. That was a very important topic because this helps people to communicate faster. Okay, I'm gonna talk about the heroes of the 1920s. In 1929, Americans spent $4.5 billion on entertainment. That includes sports. People crowd into baseball games to see their heroes. That actually, baseball is one of the most traditional sports in the United States. Babe Ruth, this man of here, was a larger than life American hero who played for the Yankees. He hit 60 homers in 1927. Lindbergh flight. American most beloved hero of the time wasn't an athlete, but a small town pilot named Charles Lindbergh. Lindbergh made the first non-stop solo transatlantic flight, a historic flight. He took off from New York City in the spirit of St. Louis, that was a plane, and arrived in Paris 33 hours later to a hero's welcome. Okay, I'm gonna talk about something the majority of the people know, that is entertainment and art. The one of here is Steamboat Willie, but actually is Mickey Mouse. Even before sound, movies offered a means of escape to romance and comedy. This like entertainment have no sound. The first sound movies was The Jazz Singer in the 1927. The first animated with sound was this one, Steamboat Willie, in the 1928. By the 1930, millions of Americans went to the movies each week. Okay, I'm gonna talk about music and art, and it's one of the most important because we are talking here about jazz in the music and art. We're going to talk about Gershwin and the Hopper famous Nighthawks. Famed composer George Gershwin merged traditional elements with American jazz. Painters like Edward Hopper, despite the loneliness of American life. Georgia O'Keeffe captured the grandeur of New York using intensely colored canvases. This one here is a paint. Okay, I'm gonna talk about literature. The writers of the 1920s. In the 1920s was one of the greatest literary eras in American history. Sinclair Lewis, the first American to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, wrote the novel David. In David, the main character ridiculized American conformity and materialism. That is one of the topics. The next one is F. Scott Fitzgerald coined the phrase "just age" to describe the 1920s. Fitzgerald wrote The Paradise Lost and the Great Gatsby. That is the book that we are reading right now in the class of English. The Great Gatsby reflects the emptiness of New York elite society. The next one is Edith Wharton's The Age of Innocence, dramatized the clash between traditional and modern values. William Cather celebrates the simple, dignified lives of immigrant farmers in Nebraska, in my Antonio. Okay, Ernest Hemingway, wound in the World War One, became one of the best-known authors of the era. In his novels, The Sun Also Rises and A Fatal Trams, he could criticize the glorification of war. I'm gonna talk about the Lost Generation. Okay, some writers such as Hemingway and John Dos Passos were so absorbed by American culture that they chose to settle in Europe. In Paris, they formed a group that one writer called the Lost Generation. Okay. I'm gonna talk about the Harlem Renaissance, that it's very historic for American, most for the Afro-American community. Okay, between the 1910 and 1920, the Great Migration saw hundreds of thousands of African Americans move north to big cities. By 1920, over million of nations, 12 million black people live in cities, by the over 40%. Okay, the American goals. Found in the 1909, the NAACP urged African Americans to protest racial violence. The W.E.B. Du Bois, a founding member, led a march of 10,000 black men in New York City to protest the violence. Okay, I'm going to talk about Harlem in New York. Harlem, New York, became the largest black urban community of the United States. Harlem suffered from overcrowding, unemployment, and poverty. However, in the 1920s, it was home to a literary and artistic revival known as the Harlem Renaissance. Here is a picture. We can see people using the piano, people dancing, people singing. Okay. I'm going to talk about the African American writers, like only two, because I'm out of time. The Harlem Renaissance was primarily a literary movement led by a well-educated blacks with a new sense of pride in the African American experience. Claude McKay's poems express the pain of life in ghetto. That's how they called Harlem. Okay, I'm going to talk about Edward Kennedy, Duke Ellington. In the late 1920s, Duke Ellington, a jazz pianist and composer, led his 10-piece orchestra at the famous Cotton Club. Ellington was renowned as one of the American greatest composers. Okay, that's the end of my presentation of the Roaring Twenties.